So thanks to Owen for that very informative introduction. As he mentioned, I'm working on Carbon, and we're building a price-stable cryptocurrency. So I wanted to start this out with a little bit of a story on how me and my co-founders got to know each other, because I think we have a pretty unique mix of people. All four of us are college dropouts. We live in an apartment together in Hudson Yards. We rarely leave, almost never. Uber Eats everything. There's a gym in the building. It's great. So before Carbon, I worked at a number of startup companies in New York City and San Francisco. Was a student at Columbia, dropped out last semester. I was studying humanities and psychology. And I was sitting in my new apartment in Midtown and was on Twitter, connected with a friend through a mutual friend who I worked on an app with together. And he introduced me to a guy at USC who has been studying cryptocurrencies for like 2 years now. So we started Skyping a lot and talking about different ICOs. We did some investing together, which was pretty fun. So we kind of kept that conversation going. And then one day, someone who he worked on a virtual Ethereum hackathon with, I didn't even know like they worked together, but he just randomly followed me on Twitter. So I was like, okay, cool, right? Like this guy goes to Stanford, like he's into cryptocurrencies. So I direct messaged him. I'm like, yo, like I'm into crypto too. And then he's like, dude, I'm like really into this like stablecoin concept. So we should talk about it. So at the time I was actually working at Consensus, which is an Ethereum studio building a lot of different decentralized applications. So we FaceTime, and then I'm like, yo, like this guy's a chiller, right? So he told me that he was going to Mexico like 3 days after our call to go to DevCon. So DevCon is like the largest Ethereum hackathon. Highly recommend it. Like everyone's there. Like Vitalik speaks. All the guys working on like Casper speak. So right after the call, or at the end of the call, I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna buy a plane ticket to Cancun, and we're gonna like share an Airbnb on like Monday. So I buy an airplane ticket, and then fly to Mexico, and then we meet up, and then Miles is in California. So Miles is the guy that I got introduced to, and then I called up Miles, who was literally in class. So he was like, he's a student at USC. He goes to the business school there, undergrad business school. And he picks up, and he straight up takes the next ticket to Mexico. So all of a sudden, the three of us are in Mexico. We're all interested in stablecoins. And we start kind of pretending that we're like a team. Like we weren't actually a team, but we were like, yo, like we have a company. So we're like, telling like all of these there's so many, like we call them Bitcoin lottery winners, kind of like the guy, your neighbor who like bought Bitcoin at like $10, who's like rich now. We told like all of these Bitcoin lottery winners like, all right, we're building the stable coin, like we're trying to make like a new world currency, and like people were like, yo, like when can we write you a check? Like they literally took out their checkbook, and we haven't incorporated or anything. So we were like, shit, like this could be like a real thing. I probably shouldn't have sweared. But we were like, damn, like this could be a real, like this could be a real company. So we started like brainstorming ideas, started brainstorming the concept more. We were actually ziplining when we thought of Carbon in Mexico. So we started working on this company, everyone comes back, and I'm immediately trying to get everyone to drop out. So like there's 3 people, 2 at Stanford, 1 at USC. Gavin and Sam, they met like freshman year, and they were seniors. So within like 3 hours, I got everyone to drop out. They all told their parents. Their parents were like, what is going on? Right, like 1 trip to Mexico. So everyone drops out. We're working on this full time. We're Skyping every single day, working on the white paper, working on the deck, talking to investors. I quit my job, so I was working on this full time with no salary for a while. And everyone flies to New York. We get this apartment together, and that kind of brings me here. So I want to talk a little bit about what we're building at Carbon, why we think it matters, and what the future looks like. So I think, how many people here own any sort of cryptocurrencies? Okay, cool. So, I think it's no surprise to a lot of us here that, crypto has done extremely, extremely well in price. Some of the highest returning ICOs actually have well over 100,000% plus returns, which is just absurd. But with all of this hype, all of this new investment in the space, what's holding us back from really taking crypto to the next level? And fundamentally, we think the two things are throughput and volatility. The volatility issue mainly stems from the fact that most cryptocurrencies are fixed supply, right? So taking Bitcoin as an example, there's only 21 million that are ever going to be in existence. And because of that, it can't react in fluctuating demand. So when demand fluctuates, the underlying per unit cost fluctuates as well. So how are we going to solve these two things that are really going to bring distributed ledgers and cryptocurrency to the rest of the world? Well, with throughput, we have a lot of really, really promising solutions by people much older and much smarter than us. Hashgraph, for example, is a project that we really like that uses a DAG, a directed acyclic graph. Ethereum has its own scaling that's probably going to take it to thousands of transactions per second. We have EOS, which uses a new sort of consensus algorithm, as well as Lightning Labs, Blockstart Labs, which is doing on-chain scaling. And then for volatility, of course, we have stablecoins, which is us. Fundamentally, there have been three approaches to trying to build a stablecoin. The first is fiat-backed. So everyone that owns cryptocurrency is probably aware of Tether. So Tether, backs each coin with $1 in a bank in an unknown country. And then you have MakerDAO, which has an over-collateralization model using Ether as the underlying collateral. So you can think of Tether as being centralized and collateralized. MakerDAO is decentralized and collateralized. And then the last bucket, which is the one that we fall into as well, is decentralized and uncollateralized. So there's no underlying asset that backs the value of the coin. One of the biggest players in this space is Basecoin, and the way they achieve price stability is they use a bond market, basically. So how do we achieve stability? We have an elastic supply policy where we can basically expand and contract the supply based on the demand. So there's a two-token model. Token A is the stable coin. Token B is a free-floating currency that can be worth $1,000, $10,000, whatever it may be. If we need to contract the supply, we basically auction off token B, the non-stable coin. And if we need to expand the supply, the protocol mints new coins and distributes them to the free-floating currency. So on a high level, how this works is in a contractionary phase, we have a decentralized oracle that uploads the exchange rate, basically whatever Carbon is trading at, to our protocol. So let's say that this is, in a contraction, it would be under $1, meaning that demand is lower than the circulating supply. The protocol has to contract, so carbon credits are minted and then auctioned off via our web interface and smart contract, which brings the price back to $1. And then when we expand, that's super easy because we're basically just printing money. So with the protocol prints new, mints new stablecoin, and then distributes them pro rata to holders of the carbon credit token. So what can we use something like Carbon for? I mean, really, whatever you can use money for, right? So like general value transfer, that would be like Swift, PayPal, any sort of credit card company, MasterCard, Visa. Cross-border remittances, right? Like if you're in the US and you want to send money back to your family in the Philippines, you have to go through something like Western Union, which incurs very, very high fees and is extremely slow. Cryptocurrency trading pair, Tether has about $3 billion in daily transactional volume. And then I think the most interesting thing for us, and just like cryptocurrency in general, is this ability to create programmable money, right? So like with smart contracts, you can do anything that, I mean, with a Turing-complete coding language, you can basically have arbitrarily complex language. So, some use cases of this would be time-released funds, event-triggered payments. We're actually going to be partnering with some pretty prominent ad tech companies where every time a user, like clicks or like, finishes, like buys something, it releases like a little bit of funds to the marketer or something. So, as I said, value transfer as we know it has really high fees, low customizability, and is expensive for resolution as well. Here we can see an example of what happens every time you swipe your credit card. It goes through a lot of different centralized parties. Visa, for example, one of the reasons why they've been able to have such dominant market share is they have a 1,000-page rule book, which basically outlines all of these different hypothetical situations like merchant fees, different chargeback fees, resolution costs. And this is sort of the industry standard for what happens when something unexpected happens in the value transfer. But with smart contracts, we can basically take this rule book and then we can crowdsource it, right? So we can encode this entire thing into the value transfer itself. So there doesn't have to be centralized third parties that step in and have to handle those situations. And getting rid of these centralized parties gets rid of cost tremendously. So using Swift for wire transfers costs $15 to $50. Credit card, you have percentages based on the purchase amount. PayPal, same thing. And with Carbon, within any two nodes in the Carbon network, we can get it costs less than a penny, and we can probably do better than that as well. That's estimated right now. So with this programmable value transfer, we can encode very high. We can have high contextualization in value transfer, and like I said, with a Turing-complete language, infinite complexity, and low resolution costs. So I think the two common questions that we get from like investors and like people in our community are number one, you're pegged to the U.S. dollar, right? Like what happens if the U.S. dollar crashes, which is, I mean it's a while out, but we'll see. But you're pegged to the U.S. dollar, so like what's up with that? And secondly, what are you going to move it to? Oh, also, the second question was actually different. It was, what is it backed by? Like, what is the intrinsic value? And I think a lot of times we kind of forget what fiat actually means. And it's the formal definition is a currency that a government has declared to be legal tender, but is not backed by a physical commodity. So really, I mean, the line between cryptocurrencies and real currencies is very, very thin. Right? Like we have, with the US dollar specifically, I mean, we have this interest rate mechanism by the central bank, and also an obligation to pay your taxes in US dollars, which sort of gives it value. But I don't think that cryptocurrencies not being backed by anything is really a good reason for us not to try to move towards cryptocurrencies as our main medium of exchange. And we can see when we have uncontrolled central parties with all of this power, sometimes it turns out pretty poorly. You can actually buy a $100 trillion note of Zimbabwean currency on eBay, which has a face value of about 40 cents. So having said all that, we do want to move away from the USD peg one day. We can imagine ourselves moving to some sort of basket of goods. CPIs are possibilities. That's consumer price index. There's purchasing power indexes. And then also, as the world gets more and more tokenized, baskets of tokens are also a potential very stable peg that doesn't rely on any governments. So in summary, Carbon is a stable, programmable, lightning-fast, and trustless money. If you'd like to learn more, our website is carbon.money, and we're also hiring a lot of people, so you can email me at connor@carbon.money. Thank you.